Greetings and welcome to the lesson. The subject is boardroom dynamics. We continue with the chapter known as governance structures. We defined governance structure as a framework that specifies the distribution of rights and responsibilities among different stakeholders, such as the board, the managers, and the shareholders. And a governance structure also spells out the rules and procedures for decision-making in corporate affairs. That's what we defined as a governance structure in our last session. Today we want to study the components of a governance structure. Components of a governance structure. Candidates, an effective governance structure or framework establishes stable and acceptable relationships between shareholders, between the board, the management, and other stakeholders. And in effect, it defines an agreed distribution of power between the main players involved with the firm. The main what? The main players involved with the firm, starting from the shareholders, the board, the management, and other stakeholders. So a governance structure is a framework that specifies the distribution of rights and responsibilities among the different stakeholders in a corporate context, in matters to do with corporations. And that is just the components. When referring to components of governance structures, we are referring to the powers and the rights of shareholders, the powers and the rights and responsibilities of the board, the powers and the rights and responsibilities of management. And candidates, the component, the governance structure is composed of two dimensions. Two dimensions. There are two dimensions. Two dimensions. The first one is known as conformance dimension. The conformance dimension, from the word conform, right? The conformance dimension. Then there is the performance dimension. Performance dimension, from the word perform. Performance dimension and conformance dimension. And candidates, in general, the conformance dimension tends to take what we call a historical view, while a performance dimension is forward-looking. Conformance dimension. Conformance responsibilities, because remember we said that a governance structure spells out the responsibilities, the accountabilities, the powers of the main players in corporate affairs. So the conformance responsibilities focus on assuring shareholders of conformance, responsibilities. Now, conformance responsibilities, I've said, are kind of responsibilities that offer assurance. They focus on providing assurance to stakeholders concerning, one, the effectiveness of identification, prioritization, management, control, mitigation, and reporting of strategic, tactical, and operational risks. All right? The key word there is risks, operational risks. Conformance responsibilities do what? Assure the stakeholders concerning the effectiveness of identifying, prioritizing, managing, controlling, mitigating, and reporting of strategic risks. Strategic risks. We have tactical risks and operational risks. That is one. Number two, performance responsibilities assure the different stakeholders of, or that the organization is working effectively and efficiently. Effectively and efficiently. Conformance responsibilities assure the stakeholders that the organization is working effectively and efficiently to achieve its strategic and operational goals. C, conformance responsibilities also assure the stakeholders that the systems that help in generating financial and non-financial information are working. All right? Conformance responsibilities assure the stakeholders that the systems that help in generating financial and non-financial information are working as prescribed. Are working all right? Are working as prescribed according to the standards, and that they are reliable. Conformance responsibilities. They also assure, these responsibilities also assure the stakeholders that the management's fiduciary responsibilities are being met. Fiduciary responsibilities are being met. And lastly, conformance responsibilities assure the stakeholders that the organization is able to prevent and detect criminal activities such as fraud, such as money laundering, such as theft, such as misappropriation of funds and assets, and so on. These are conformance responsibilities. Conformance responsibilities. Then we have performance responsibilities. Under what we mentioned here, the performance dimension. Performance dimension. Performance dimension. Performance what? Performance dimension. Now, Candidates' performance responsibilities, on the other hand, focus on strategy. The responsibilities under performance also focus on value creation as well as resource utilization. And the responsibilities include one, these are performance responsibilities. The performance responsibilities include establishment of a robust decision-making process. Establishment of a robust decision-making. Because candidates, the performance dimension focuses on strategy, focuses on value creation, focuses on resource utilization. That can only be achieved. Strategic objectives can only be achieved if there is a robust decision-making process. And this decision-making process has to include what we call determination of risk appetite. Because the oversight of strategy implementation and evaluation of the strategy is relevant for any success of a business. Responsibilities under performance dimension also include alignment of business operations. Alignment of business operations. Alignment of business operations. Alignment of business operations and resource utilization with strategic direction. Alignment of business operations with what? With strategic direction. The business must operate in such a way as to achieve the strategic objectives. Performance. When carrying out the day-to-day operations, the activities that take place on daily basis should be activities that go a long way in fulfilling or achieving the strategic objectives that are set by the company. Then, still under performance dimension, responsibility may also include the identification of the critical points at which an organization needs to make decisions in response to changing conditions. Responding to changing conditions. Responding to what? To changing conditions. And candidates, these are some of the responsibilities. It should be noted that the conformance dimension and the performance dimension enhance each other. They enhance each other and also the organization as a whole. Is that clear, candidates? We are discussing components of a governance structure. We've defined it as a framework that describes the various responsibilities, various accountabilities and powers of the major players in a corporate setup. All right? So let's proceed and discuss the the distribution of rights and responsibilities among different stakeholders. Candidates, we defined a governance structure as a framework that specifies the distribution of rights and responsibilities among different stakeholders, So we want to move and get into the details of the rights and responsibilities among the different stakeholders, beginning with the shareholders. One, shareholders. Candidates, there is a widespread recognition of, that both in a company law and also amongst the business community that a key objective of a private sector company is to further the interests of its shareholders. There is a widespread recognition of that fact. And this fact is recognized in the company law as well as the business community at large. There is agreement that the main objective of a private sector company is to further the interests of its shareholders. And the board should act in a way that is most likely to promote the success of the company for the benefit of the members of the company, who are the shareholders. But be that as it may, in practice, shareholders do not tend to have direct power over the operations of a company. The power of shareholders primarily arises from the ability to appoint, to dismiss, and influence the decision-making of the board of directors. And such powers are defined both by company law, which establishes the baseline of shareholder rights, and the specific contents of a company's constitutional instruments. These are the Articles of Association and the Memorandum of Association. In addition, candidates, the shareholders may enter into agreements amongst themselves. And such shareholder agreements may further define the rights and responsibilities of the shareholders. For example, those agreements relating to the transferability of shares or the rights of different categories of shareholding and so on. And beyond the compliance with the law, a governance framework must decide how shareholders' interaction with the company should be organized. In addition, a governance framework may wish to highlight the responsibilities as well as the rights of shareholders. Responsibilities as well as the rights of shareholders. And I must say that a proactive and a constructive relationship between the shareholders and the board will increase mutual understanding and commitment both at times of crisis and during the normal business conditions. And one of the difficulties faced by shareholders is asserting their interests. And there may be a variety of competing and conflicting objectives. And that can pose a problem, especially with the family companies, where some family members are actively involved in the management of the company and others are not. And in such cases, it is important for a governance framework to define the accepted relationships between the shareholders. And that can include procedures by which conflicts can be anticipated and resolved in an effective manner. There also ought to be effective procedures for family governance so as to enhance a long-term success of such businesses. All right? Distribution of rights and responsibilities among different stakeholders, the shareholders. We've discussed the rights and responsibilities of shareholders. We say these rights can be, shareholders can have these rights, can define the rights among themselves. These rights can be contained in constitutional instruments. These rights can be conferred on shareholders by law, and so on. Then there is a second stakeholder, the directors. Directors. Now, candidates, one of the main shareholder rights is to do what? Is to nominate the directors and define the powers of the board of directors. That's what we said here. One of the rights of a shareholder is to appoint, to dismiss, They have the power to appoint, they have the power to dismiss these directors. That's one of the main shareholder rights, to nominate directors and also to define the powers of the board. Define the powers of these directors who sit on a board. Okay? And as such, the shareholders ultimately define the overall controls of the governance framework. The board of directors is envisaged as the primary decision-making body of the company. And it is collectively responsible for all the aspects of company's activities. And notwithstanding the possibility for shareholders to limit the power of the board, its broad responsibilities include establishing and maintaining the company's vision, establish and maintain vision, and mission. That is the responsibility of the directors. To do what? To establish and maintain the company's vision and mission, as well as values. B, to establish its structure. It is the responsibility of the directors to do what? To establish company structure, to establish company strategy, and risk profile. That is the responsibility of the directors. It is also the directors' responsibility to delegate authority to management. Delegate authority to management. It is the responsibility of the directors to delegate authority to the management, as well as monitoring, because once authority is delegated, then the board should monitor and monitor. After monitoring, the board should evaluate, all right, delegate, monitor, and evaluate the implementation of policies. D, it is the responsibility of the directors to come up with strategies and operational plans, to develop strategies and operational plans, to develop strategies and operational plans. They also account, the directors also account, they account to, and they are responsible to shareholders. Responsible to the shareholders. So these are the responsibilities of the directors. And we mentioned that it is the responsibility of the shareholders to appoint these directors, to dismiss these directors, to define the powers of these directors. These directors have the responsibility to establish and maintain vision and mission statements and values. They also have the responsibility to establish its company structure, strategy, and risk profile. Directors have the responsibility to delegate authority to management, to monitor and evaluate implementation of policies. D, they develop strategies and operational plans, and E, account to and the responsible to the shareholders. Is that clear, learners? And don't forget, we are discussing components of governance structures. We've defined governance structures as a framework that specifies the distribution of rights and powers, rights and responsibilities among different stakeholders. This is directors as stakeholders. We've also said here that a governance framework also spells out the rules and procedures for decision making in corporate affairs. So the governance framework will also establish the board's specific responsibilities. The board's specific responsibilities. A governance framework will also define the board structure, the board's size, all right? It will define the composition of the board, as well as the process by which directors are appointed to the board. So the organization and logistics of the board meetings are also important aspects of the governance framework or the governance structure. And when it comes to the management of the board, there are various key issues that should be defined within the governance structure, like the role of the chairman, the frequency of board meetings, the management of the board agenda, the nature of information that is to be provided to the board or to the directors, what we call information architecture. We may also have a key issue like taking minutes. Other issue would be the nature and the style of boardroom discussion and decision making. Not forgetting the role of the company secretary. So the governance framework candidates should also determine if the board should delegate specific board responsibilities to committees. For example, the audit committee, the nomination committee, the remuneration committee, and so on. So when you talk about governance structures, that's what we are referring to. So when it comes to directors, there is a lot that has to be defined if a company is to meet its objectives, because directors, we've said, exercise delegated authority from the shareholders who appoint the directors. They may also dismiss the directors. So these shareholders must define the responsibilities and the powers of the directors. So directors is another stakeholder. Let's move on to the third stakeholder, number 3, management. The management. Now, candidates, the management has the greatest capacity to determine the success or failure of an enterprise. And although managers are not the firm's key decision makers, they are responsible for running the firm on day-to-day basis. And in that role, they need to be granted what we call executive power to exercise discretion over the operation of the firm. And a key aspect of the governance structure is to establish an appropriate level of executive power to delegate to management. Because if too little power is granted and a manager's freedom of action is excessively constrained, then the company is likely to become inflexible. So managers may be unable to implement the board strategy if their powers and responsibilities are constrained. However, with too much power also, the risk exists that management will lose touch with the interests of the board. They'll do what? They lose touch with the interests of the board as well as the interests of the shareholders. If they wield so much power, they'll forget about the interests of the board as well as the interests of the shareholders. So management should not be given too much power, neither should their power be constrained. All right? Too much power comes with risks. Because when they have too much power, they may pursue their own agenda. And that's what we discussed when we talked about the agency theory. Agency theory, all right? Because managers are agents. So the government framework candidates must also work to align the incentives of management with shareholders and other stakeholders. There has to be what we call remuneration policy. There has to be what we call contractual conditions with respect to the most senior managers. For example, the managing director, the CEO. These are important stakeholders of the company. The top management candidates also, the succession of top management is also an important issue that should be addressed by the governance framework or structure. Then we have the last number 4, other stakeholders. Other than the shareholders, the directors and the board and the management, there are other stakeholders. The role and impact of other company stakeholders, such as the employees, the financiers, the suppliers, the local community, the government, their roles varies considerably among or across companies. Their roles also vary considerably across industries, across countries. However, candidates, regardless of legal obligations, the governance framework should also take into account the interests of these other stakeholders. The risks to the firm should always take into account the reputation and so on. Because there could be risks to the reputation of the firm. So it's important to consider ways of establishing dialogue and constructive engagement with the relevant stakeholders. So a governance structure should not just spell out the responsibilities and the rights of shareholders or directors or management. No, it has to spell out also the rules and procedures for decision making in corporate affairs as far as stakeholders are concerned. These are the suppliers, the local communities, the government, and also we have the financiers, the investors. All these stakeholders may have a part to play as far as the fulfillment of the strategic objectives of the company is concerned. So candidates, these are the components of governance structure. We've discussed the various components like the shareholders, the directors, the management, the stakeholders. We've discussed the dimensions of a corporate structure, the conformance dimension, the performance dimension. We've discussed the conformance responsibilities as well as the performance responsibilities in this lesson. So thank you for attending today's lesson. I'm going to give you one question here for your assignment. Describe the components of governance structure of corporations in your country. That is your today's assignment. Thank you for your time. I hope to meet you in our next session where we continue to study the subject corporate boardroom dynamics. We are still on the third chapter, governance structures. Today we've done the components of governance structures. Next lesson we are going to study the board size. Then we'll look at the committee structure, the director considerations, best practices when creating and implementing governance structures, then evaluating governance structures in organizations. Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye.